Hi. Hi, how are you? Okay, there's a lot of people here, so I'm a little nervous because I've never done anything like this before. So really, I want to keep this as casual as possible to walk you through the beginning of a cue all the way to the very end of a cue. And I thought it would be a good idea to bring some of my friends here, Amy Doherty, who is a fantastic composer in her own right, but is my orchestrator on Star Trek Discovery, and Tracy Turnbull, who is my trusted scoring assistant on the show. So if there are... And we also have some wonderful musicians who are going to come out and play as well. If there are any questions at all in the middle of this process, I'm happy to stop and talk to you about what you may be seeing that maybe I'm not explaining right, or maybe is totally incomprehensible, because again, I've never done this before, so I'm hoping that I can be relatively clear. Also, there are little things like, we set up this little mini studio here, so when Pro Tools crashes, and we know that it will crash, we will use that time for a Q&A as well. So the very first thing I wanted to do was watch this scene without music, so we can get an idea of what I do when I'm sitting with a producer and or a director, and have a conversation about how music should affect the scene, how music should grow in a scene, how music should sort of maybe come out in a scene. And I thought it would be a good idea to watch it without music, and then you'll see how I then build it from there. So let's do that. And Tracy will help me with that.
Let's do this.
And again, here we are, Pro Tools taking some time, just so you know.
It already crashed.
That never happens back at the studio.
Okay.
Great, so if you could make the, yeah.
Just give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Them. You want dialogue, yes?
I do. You should leave the dialogue in the, yes, that'd be great.
I think I'll turn it down.
I'm actually going to watch it down here so I don't crane my neck. So usually, the whole thing is delivered to me with temp music and temp effects and temp VFX and temp sound effects. Normally, in this particular situation, I don't really bother paying attention to the temp music, because a lot of times they just put silly stuff like Inception in, which I hear all the time. So I usually mute it and then just sort of watch without. So let's do that.
I got you, Red. Lead the way.
Michael.
You're not coming, are you?
I wish I could say yes. But someone has to make sure nothing like Control ever happens again. Someone inside the gray areas.
Section 31.
Otherwise, we could be right back here no matter where you end up.
Commander, the Enterprise will be here in 11 minutes. Are you on your way?
I'll be right there.
There is a battle coming, Sarana.
I do not know if this message will reach you in time. The odds are not in our favor. If we never see each other again, you must know, sweet sister, how much I love you.
I'll never know if I made you proud. I hope so. But even if I haven't, I made myself proud. And I can feel how you respect that. Mom, I can feel it.
I can feel I frightened you by making my own path. I hope you see this one day and that you'll forgive me. I'll keep all of you deep within me.
I wish we had more
I
time.
wish I could tell you this in person, but you're my rock, Tazzy. Every test I tanked, the 28 times I wanted to quit. And after my injury, it only takes one person, I guess, to save another. You're my best friend.
And you always could translate mom and dad to me, and vice versa. Even though I still don't know what dad's talking about half the time. I know you think I was their favorite, but I'm just louder.
They love you so much. They would do anything for you.
So the first thing that I noticed when I was watching the scene is first of all, it's a very important scene for the show and at this point in the story arc of this season, because all of them have now decided that they're going to leave their families behind and they're going to go 1,000 years in the future. Spoiler alert in case nobody has seen season 2. Or maybe nobody watches Star Trek, which is fine too. But the idea here is that we wanted to make this all of a piece because it's all one big emotional goodbye. It's all one big, everybody saying goodbye to the people that they love the most. We talked a lot about how to evoke those feelings and evoke the fact that they have to let go of one another. Can you play it from the very beginning? So in the beginning of it, we talked about wanting to give Burnham and Ash their proper goodbye. And a lot of it was going to be in the dynamic of the music as opposed to what the music was actually playing, because the scene between them, it has a very minimal beginning and then it has this big kiss that happens, and I wanted to not be too on the nose with it, but I wanted to make it really, really important. So when I was talking about it with Alex, who's the showrunner, we talked about like having it sort of maybe carve out a little bit and then maybe come back in very big right when they kiss and the camera pans around. And then the next part of it becomes the montage of goodbyes and how to delineate between the characters without it sounding like a big jumble or too what's the word? It didn't want to sound too Frankenstein. It wanted to be like of a piece and yet still giving each one of the individual characters their own thematic sort of goodbye. So we watched it a number of times, and we decided to keep it all as one piece of music as opposed to splitting it up into two, Ash and Burnham and their goodbye and then the rest of the montage, but to try to keep it all together in one. Let's watch it one more time from the top.
I got you, Red. Lead the way.
Michael.
So we decided to start the music right on the door closing. So we have this shot here.
You're not coming, are you?
Which is a subtle entry we thought would be a good idea.
I wish I could say yes. But someone has to make sure nothing like control ever happens again. Someone inside the gray areas.
It's Section 31.
Otherwise, we could be right back here no matter where you end up.
Commander, the Enterprise will be here in 11 minutes. Are you on your way?
I'll be right there.
So there's this moment which needed to slow down, and then it needed to come back to them kissing, and that was sort of the big sort of aha moment when I spotted it with him. So I wonder if there is anyone else who has another idea? Because, you know, the fact is, I'm happy to take your question, but the first thing I want to say is 2, 3, 5 different composers can look at this scene in 3, 5 different ways. So anybody can have an idea that is totally valid and totally creatively meaningful, which is why I ask. So do you have a different idea of how this might go?
When you talk about dynamics, my gut was to go the opposite way with dynamics. So she's an empowered character, so she seems to me, at least I'm not up to date on the show, but she seems to me as though you would want to show her striding off purposefully and there being a sort of like deep impact as the reality of him not coming. And then as she runs up, you might expect it to sort of swell, but as they impact, the dynamic drops right out.
That's certainly one way to do it, and that's a really interesting idea. And I actually really tend to like to play opposite of a scene. You know, the thing about Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek in general is when there is an emotion, play it. And that we sort of really go into that. So we don't want to be too much on the nose, but we do really play into the things that you're expecting the character to feel. So in supporting that, the idea is to always sort of go with it and allow yourself to go on the same journey as the character. Anybody else? Anybody else has a question? Okay, so. Let's just move now towards the end of it. And then there was the way to have to try to get out of this scene. And you know, that's always somewhat of a work in progress. You know, a lot of composing, and once I sort of go over there and show you how it got built, you know, a lot of composing is feeling around in the dark. You know, you're sitting there and you're playing on your keyboard or whatever it is you're playing on, and you're looking at the screen, and you either have an idea or you don't have an idea, and I think you kind of poke around until you do. And when you try, for me, when I try to come out of a cue, when I know that there's a place where the cue needs to end, I sort of try to figure out like what it is I'm playing and how that's going to end, and it sort of ends by itself. A lot of times that works, and sometimes it doesn't work, and when it doesn't work, I end up trying again. But the most important thing that I always realize in working on a show like this, because there are so many moving parts, is that my very first idea is my only idea. I don't get to have a second idea. I don't get to really sit and wonder like, oh, okay, should it be this thematic material? Okay, this is nice. I don't get to do that. I kind of need to just think about what it is and then just do it. It's a very fluid process. So we'll start looking at that, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to move over there. It's too quiet in here. We need transition music or something. Someone help me. I know. Yes. Okay, so you do get to have a second idea when somebody asks you for a second idea. The reason why you don't get to have a second idea when you're in the middle of having to write 35 minutes of orchestrated music is because there simply isn't an amount of time. You know, when Star Trek is in full production and we're spotting an episode, the episode mixes. The dub mix is usually 2 weeks after the spotting session. So and that's generous. It's generous. They try to be generous because we're recording all these episodes. So if I spot it on a Monday, and it's never on a Monday, it's always on a Friday. And when it's on a Friday, then you're like, well, the 2 extra days are Saturday and Sunday. But let's just say it's a Monday. So I've got to go back to the studio and start writing 35 minutes of music. All of that music has to then be listened to, approved, and then sent to Amy, who will talk to you about orchestrating the music, taking the MIDI sessions, and then putting it all on paper, and then getting it to the orchestra to play. All of that while managing notes. And the notes process on Star Trek is actually kind of unique because now that we're in the second season, it's gotten to the point where I'm trusted enough that they can give me notes after I've orchestrated, so I can make the changes maybe editorially or maybe just on the stand with the musicians, make minor changes. If there are major changes to something, it's usually like, oh, we got to use that one cue from that one thing and over there and put it here and we can make it work. But mainly it's simply a matter of time. Literally, there is not enough time to write that much music and pontificate about a second version of that cue. It's only if somebody says, oh, that cue doesn't work, do it again, and then you're like, okay, do it again. Yeah.
Can you describe in layperson's terms perhaps what your notes to the orchestra might look like for playing something abstract that might be codified in standard way for students, but playing negative spaces or just building, like having a tension emphasis in an active silent way, or something like that, or?
So you'll probably see when we bring the players out, I wanted to demonstrate that actually in real time. I think it's a good idea to do that. I sort of try to do that in the mock-ups. As I write, I'm writing with those dynamics in mind, and sometimes that comes across and sometimes that doesn't come across, and when it doesn't, it will be Amy's responsibility to make sure that the dynamics that I'm wanting get across to them, to the orchestra. So a lot of it is translation between what does this MIDI part look like and how is it going to look like on paper for a musician to play. And then it's, are they reading it the way I want to hear it. And then when I'm on the stand, we have conversations between the booth where Amy is and the stand where I am, or vice versa if Amy's on the stand conducting. And we talk about how it's sounding in the booth and whether or not it's doing what we originally wanted it to do dynamically. But you'll see that when I'm talking to them over there, I say, just our mock recording studio that we have. So are there any other questions before I sort of move on to the next part of? Okay, hi.
Okay, I'm really curious to know, I'm trying to imagine your process, how you do it. And when you do the MIDI files, and what does Amy add to it in orchestration, and how much information do you give to Amy? I'm just curious to know, like, I'll talk you through all that once we.
Yeah, Amy's going to come up here, and once I sort of walk through this first part, we're going to walk through that step by step. But a quick answer to that question is, 9 times out of 10, I'm writing the parts that I want to hear. So I'm writing the 5 violin lines, I'm writing the flute lines and the winds lines, and sometimes from an orchestrational standpoint, what I'm doing in MIDI doesn't necessarily translate to a live orchestra, because samples and live players are totally different, and samples react in different ways than real live orchestras do, and that I think is one of the more important jobs of an orchestrator. But of course there are times also where I've written something and I say directly to Amy, we need to do this, but I didn't do that in the MIDI. So can you do that? Fix that. Add this. Do that. Do whatever you want. Make it bigger here. Make it big there. Or make it small here. Or make it really emotional here, and make them play it this way. Yeah, and. Right. Then there are like custom sounds and orchestrational effects that we like to do to make it sound unique, because you can only use so much of Symphobia before you've used every Symphobia patch ever. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about then. And they sound fucking awesome, but you just can't, you can't use them in every episode, because then everything sounds the same. Okay. So for me, one of the most important things when I'm writing a piece like this, which is emotional in nature, is to try to figure out when I'm sitting down to have an idea, the first thing I think is what and who am I dealing with, and what's the emotional context. And in this first scene, it's Ash and Burnham, and if you haven't watched the whole show, you might not understand this, but in season 1, it's revealed that Ash and a Klingon were merged into one, and Ash was actually a spy, and infiltrated the Discovery. So my first thought was, how do I utilize the Klingon theme here in a major way as opposed to a minor way? Because it's not bad, but he still has remnants of that part of his personality in him. And that's part of what she fell in love with. So I wanted to start with what that melody was and how that could affect this whole scene. And that's where the kiss sort of comes in. So I usually sit down and just sort of, you know, find a note to play, you know, and find a, hang on one second so I can sort of make this bigger, because I can't see it. There we go. I will usually, so 4 is empty. The top one is, so if I went like,
Do you want to see everything?
that would be everything, right? Or no, just that one?
Number 3 would be everything.
Okay. Okay. So a lot of times, I didn't bring my glasses, but okay, there's everything. Did somebody say, do you want some readers? Oh my God. Yes. I mean, people, yeah. Here we go. That's the coolest thing in the world. Oh my God, now I can see. Look at that. Okay. That's hilarious. Okay. So, let me just try to do this, which is, right. A lot of times what I do is I start just by, you know, playing. So will this even play? Yes, it probably will. Maybe not. Uh-oh. Well, oh. Trace.
Hold on.
This is the story of my life here. Well, that one was working. Yeah. But it might just be a. Hang on. Yeah. Ooh. No, it's not working. This one? Okay, maybe that'll work. Right. So usually what I do is I start by finding a note. In Star Trek, it's D. It's always D. Everything is D. I know that sounds funny, but it's so true. D minor, right? Saddest of all keys. I don't know if most of the people in here know what I'm talking about, but it's definitely a very effective key. We can try to be fancy and try to not be in D, and whenever I try to be fancy and not be in D, I end up back in D. You know, occasionally you don't write in D when you want something to be a little happier, but there's not a ton of happy music in Star Trek. There's we're about to crash again. But that's okay because yeah, that's fine. I'll quit it. You wanna? Huh? You wanna?
Do you want them to D still?
Yeah.
We could use the stems.
Okay, you can do that. Okay. But I just wanted to be able to do that. But that's
Okay.
Did this get turned off? No, this still on. So, you know, how many people in here are composers? Wow. Okay, so that's a lot. So, if you're not a composer, raise your hand. So, what are you? No. I say that with all due respect. Like, so are you a musician? Do Songwriters, so a lot of songwriters. So you know, one of the things I think comes in very handy for people who write songs. I don't know if you're a songwriter, but I heard songwriter over here. I just assume it's you too. We as songwriters tell stories, right? So I know my friends Wendy and Lisa are seated right there. They've been writing songs for forever, and one of the things that they taught me was, as you tell stories with songs, it sort of applies in the same way that you tell stories for picture. You know, you understand the emotional context of what someone is saying, and that's what you have to do as a songwriter, especially if you're the writer of music as opposed to the writer of lyrics. In my band, I wrote mostly music and not really lyrics. It was really mainly about music and trying to figure out what a melody might be, but not really lyrical. And I just was never very good with words. I was much better with notes. So how this all applies to songwriters is probably all the same thing. Like, as I sit down and write, if somebody wants to write a song for a scene, I imagine it can work in the same way that I write a piece of score for a scene, except for instead of there being lyrics with the song, the dialogue is the lyrics. And I remember that Wendy told me that a long time ago. So I think it applies to everyone who wants to write any kind of music for narrative. It's really all about waiting for Pro Tools at this point. We are almost there. I know. The idea of this actually happening is actually pretty important, because a lot of what we do is wait for Pro Tools to work. That's why there's not a lot of time. Yeah. Well, so as a creator, a showrunner creator creates a story Bible for the studio and the network in order to describe what an entire series looks like. I try to do the same thing for the showrunner at the beginning of either a season or a series. With Fargo, it's on a season-by-season basis because everything is different for every season. Entire themes are thrown out from season to season, except for our main theme. In the case of Star Trek, well, I had a Bible. It was set already for me. There are these very iconic themes that I get to sometimes use. In this show, I would utilize Sandy Courage's main, iconic da 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 da. So I will do that because it's very evocative, and I can utilize that. But there's not only that thematically and that musically, there's also sort of an idea as to how to do music for Star Trek. We know where music is going to go because that's just really the way it's been done. And I'm talking mainly about the movies and the original TV show. Like what happened in Star Trek The Next Generation was different. They utilized music in a different way, which is something that we decided to not do in this new iteration of Star Trek. In The Next Generation, they sort of decided that they wanted music to just be more of a wallpaper type thing. And we wanted it to be more like the movies. We wanted to make cinematic music. So we set that Bible early. Alex and I sat down and talked about how music should be. And I wrote a number of suites of themes for the show early on, including the main title. And that sort of set the tone for how we thought season 1 was going to be. And then season 2 ended up going in a bit of a different direction quickly.
Just quickly, how did you go from being a musician with a lot of player and bars, getting all that stuff, what did you play, and how did you go from there to score? Was there a short answer, or?
No, I can give you a quick thing is that I ended up in Wendy and Lisa's studio watching them do what they do, and I loved that, and I thought that was great, and that put me in a mindset to want to do it. And once you want to do something, I think then you kind of try to figure out how to do it, and you just sort of get into it. How did I figure out how to do it? if that's the question, like, you know, process and specific ways of doing things are all your own, but to watch somebody do it is the only way to learn. You can't really figure out how to do this without seeing somebody do it and then go, oh, okay, I understand. This piece of gear you can use to do this, and this is how you do that, and then, but putting music to picture always made sense to me. So I didn't sort of make a conscious decision. It was like, as I watched my friends do that, I realized that it made sense to me. That's, I think, how that happened. Like, how did what I do happen? Well, I don't know. I happened to be in the right place, the right time, with the right music and the right producer, and it was the right weather outside. There's so many things that go into it that, you know, you can't put your finger on. Okay. So do I have any of this stuff? No, I don't. Okay. Oh, it's again. Okay, wait. So Vienna shut down? Yeah. Okay. That's right. What I would say is I start with a chord, right? I start with are these first ones are the MIDI ones, right? Yeah. Okay. So I start with a chord. That's how I normally start. Like, where does it begin? What's the thing that really is going to start me going? And I usually start with like strings or a pad with this particular show. So, you know what we should do? So, as I was contemplating how to write this cue, you know, I needed to figure out a number of things. And one of those things is, how am I going to give each one of these characters their thematic material while still keeping the narrative of the two of them being together working? And you know, for Burnham, I always used flute. Flute seemed to be the right feeling for her. And so as I did that, I'm just going to mute everything. The first idea was to, you know, write this string part as they start. So a lot of time I spend a lot of time working on different parts, and I can focus on like the first 10 bars and write a little chord progression, and then the second 10 bars to feel how music is going to come in and out. And a lot of that I just play on an ensemble patch, and I'll just play around either with a piano or with a string patch, and then I'll go back. And when I go back is when I start to carve things up. You know, one of the things somebody taught me when I was a young songwriter, and I think songwriters probably know this really well, is that when you're writing lyrics, this was a lyricist who told me this, you just write and 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 keep writing, and then ruthlessly edit yourself. And I will do that on a cue. Like, I'll see, you know, I'll look at a cue and I'll be like, wait a second, there's like 90 MIDI tracks going on. I've got all this shit going on. Okay, now I have to go back and sort of cut it all up and figure out how I'm going to really shape the scene and carve the scene up. So, because you can't just play an ensemble patch and have that be meaningful to an orchestrator to put in front of an orchestra. So that's kind of the thing that I like to do the most. I'll play through on a number of different patches and continue to play, and so I'll play a big string patch like that, and then I will add I'll add winds on top of it, and then I'll end up with like carving it and then adding a little bit of the bass flute, which there isn't enough bass flute in the world, but I like to use it a lot. And then there was that moment that I wanted to let it lie for a second, to let their emotion breathe. And she's going to make the decision to turn around and leave. And I struggle here with trying to figure out where I was going to bring the music up. Was it going to be as she walked away? Was it going to be when she turned around? Or was it going to be on her return? And I did it all three ways. Like I was just doing it and doing it and doing it. And finally, like when I started editing it, I realized that you'll see the moment that she turns, it becomes a pretty, she turns away and she has a realization. The most important part of that is that's where I brought the Klingon theme in. Da, 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 dum, dum, dum. And when I watched that, I was like, okay, now this scene is making sense to me. When I watched it without music, it's sort of like, well, I don't know who's playing what and like whose emotion is what. That really felt like it was their connection because it wasn't truly this particular Klingon theme. It was a mix of that and something more major that sort of turned into. So I don't know how much in detail you want me to get in terms of like really drilling down in how I had to write each individual part and then figure out a way to sort of stick it all together. I chose looking at this particular piece of music because it is the perfect example of there is a bunch of stuff going on and it's one piece of music, but it's four pieces of music, and how do you sort of put it all together? Because now there's another aspect to it. Now, without talking about like the brass and stuff, which do play a big role in this particular part, and what I will do is I will build all of the other instruments into that as I start working as flourishes. So you start to feel the other instruments as sort of emotional embellishments. So also the thing is, as I'm working, I'm also realizing that things will end up sounding better because it's difficult to get these samples to sound as good as you'd like them to sound. You can't really get these long strings to sound really emotional. You can't really get the articulations exactly as you want them. So at some point, I got lucky enough to be able to, especially on a show like Star Trek, I got lucky enough that they allow me the opportunity to work with a bunch of really talented musicians. And it makes it slightly easier and, of course, a lot harder on a lot of different levels. And both these people who are extremely important to this entire process, like it can't be done without them, will tell you how much work goes into the sort of after thing. But I can sit back and go, okay, I know this sounds about 70% of what I would like it to be, but it will end up sounding what I really want it to be when I get on the stand and the players play it. And I'm quickly gonna run to like how this changes here. what I talked about with Alex was, can I keep it all sounding like a single piece of music and give each one of these characters their own send-off and say goodbye? And the answer was yes. I'll have to figure out how to do it. Like everybody can, I can sit in concept and think like, yes, I can do this, I can do that. But until you sit down and start playing something, you don't really understand like what something is going to be. At least I don't understand it because I'm a hands-on person. I'm not a pencil and paper writer. I wouldn't know the first thing about writing music with a pencil and paper. I have to look at a keyboard or at a guitar or something to sort of understand how something is going to work with something else. So in this case, I just decided to hand off instrumentation and hand off slight changes in the chord changes so the melody could change slightly as the entire story progressed over these 3 different goodbyes. So it went from being Ash and Burnham's theme, which I thought was its own piece of music, to being the Kelpians theme. Which a lot of times was clarinet. And then it turns into French horn, and so on and so forth. As we get to the next person, I was going to use oboe. And then past that, there was the string motif. All of this sounds sort of vaguely boring to me. And I say that in a really positive way, because we can think of music in these technical terms, but it's all about how it's making you feel. And at the end of the day, when I'm writing a piece of music, I need to be able to sit back and go, yes, I feel now what this character is feeling, or what these characters are feeling, or what these characters are trying to emote. I say this all the time, that I would always rather write and play music based on what a character is feeling rather than what a character is doing. And so many times I get asked like, okay, they're running. We need running music. And I'm like, no, it's not like we don't know they're running. They're running. We see them running. Why do we need running music? Well, let's do something else. You know, it's one thing to ask to want to have pace, you know, help a scene, because a scene was, you know, I get that phone call like, you know, the actors, they weren't really on that day, so we really need your help here. Can you help? Can you help? Can you make it feel funny? No, I can't do that. I can't make it feel funny. I can play music that makes you think that what they're doing is funny, but it's not funny. It's actually really manipulative. And I don't like to see that. And I don't like seeing movies or TV that have that, because if you're not funny, then it's not funny. It's no music is going to change that. And if a scene isn't tense, if it's not a tense scene, music can help make it a little more tense, but you know, we're not Johnson & Johnson, right? We can't fix it. We don't have a big Band-Aid. But we can help really get right to the heart of a scene. And you know, I always, do you have a question? Oh, Ms. Melvoin. Is that your mock-up that you're playing right now? It is. It is. It is, right? Yeah. Yes, yes, it is. It is. Yeah, and we try to make the mock-up sound pretty good. Like, we have to make the mock-up sound pretty good, because I have to sell the piece of music to Alex. Alex is when I refer to Alex, he's the sort of overlord of Star Trek, executive producer. He's now no longer the showrunner of any individual show. Now he runs all of the shows, and I'm also doing this new Star Trek show called Picard, which is, yeah, it's terrifying. Anyway, but I have to send him a piece of music that he listens to, and he's like, yes, that's great. Because what I know is, he knows that it's going to get better, but it still has to pass him. And at this point, the mock-ups are usually pretty good. And a lot of times, I'll be writing something, and I will say, Tracy, please fix it. Please make this work. because this transition's not working and these transitions aren't working and the legato strings are not playing the good transition in between the, and it could take like a ton of programming to fix that, and I'm not good. I'm not that good at it, so I'd rather have somebody who's really good at it. Yeah. Where was I? Oh, thanks, Wendy. Right. So I was saying something, and then Wendy asked me that question, and now I don't know where I was. Yes, thank you. So it is of utmost importance to me to always only want to play what a character's feeling rather than what a character's doing. And too many times I'm asked to fake it, and sometimes you do it. Obviously, people, it's a job, and we have to do the things that we're asked to do. They're not ideal, and I consider myself very fortunate that I get to work on a show where I've been very rare. It's rare that I've been asked to do it on this show because the action scenes are pretty action-packed and action-oriented, and Alex is not the kind of person who wants to be on the nose. We do play action music sometimes, and it's totally meaningful and totally right, and it works. But it isn't for lack of action being in the scene. We're playing the support of the scene and wanting to amp it up, and that's something that music does very well. It takes something that you have, and if it's on 8, you can make it 10 or make it 11. That's true, but you can't take something from 6 to 11. It just doesn't really work like that. If it's not on screen, then you're gonna lose. So then there's this question of sometimes we have, and this is another reason why I chose this cue. The one thing I talked about in the spotting with Alex was the end of this cue, where this cue is going to end is very awkward because of the way they edited it. And they, far be it from me to ask them to fix their edit for the music, which no one does. Back me up on that. So how to end it, and sometimes it's just diminuendo. Sometimes it's just diminuendo, right? And I think that is what I decided to do here. So there was this very awkward. He's saying something, and then you thought that was the end, right? But it wasn't, and that's when the second thing goes by, and that was what made it a little weird to me in terms of how to end it. There was the thing where you thought the end of the scene was, and even when you listen to the dialogue, you'd probably agree with me that you're like, oh, okay, and then it's not over yet. So I had to, it's one of those things, or extend it by 10 seconds and then we'll be okay. And you're like, well, what do I do for 10 seconds? D. Because D works. D9, very effective, add a 9. I'm giving away all the secrets. Shh. So at this point, what I want to do is I want to turn it over to Tracy, because now what Tracy's going to do, she's going to come over here and she's going to walk you guys through, like, when I'm done writing a cue with the MIDI, many other things have to happen before it goes to Amy. So she's going to come over here and explain to you how she takes the session, or I can walk them through with you if you like. Right, because she will take this session and prepare it to be sent over to Amy. One thing I don't do when I'm working with strings and winds and stuff is here's the thing, I'm not very good with a lot of the technical stuff. So I put it at 120 and put it at 4/4 and basically play whatever the fuck I want. Then a meter map has to be made and a tempo map has to be made, and I would my head would explode if I had to do that. I mean, I could sit and kind of figure out where that stuff goes. So a lot of what Tracy will do is, and she's going, God damn, yes. But a lot of times, so she'll have to make a meter map and make a tempo map and sort of figure out exactly what it is. Now, it's not usually that bad with tempo. Usually I'm pretty good with tempo. It's the meter mapping that, sometimes I'm in odd time signatures and I don't even know that I'm in an odd time signature. And that's what she's going to show you now. So come. Yeah. I'm going to stand over here.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Oh, okay. I'm not used to microphones. Okay. So like Jeff said, he'll usually finish. here with the MIDI, and I usually go through and print his stems, which he was playing off because Vienna never works for us. So from that, I pretty much have to go through, and especially on emotional cues, Jeff kind of plays. Whatever he wants.
I said it. I've already said
You
it.
did already say it. So I usually actually leave the tempo maps and metering to Amy, because she'll often change things anyway. But what I do need to do is, because he plays things freely, I have to make sure that it's on grid. This is very invigorating stuff, guys. So this part of the job is not the most exciting, but very important for Amy's sanity. So, for example, bass trombones here. This is a mild, oh, this one's not too bad. I think I already quantized this one a little bit. But is a mild nightmare in Sibelius. Any Sibelius users out there, you know that these notes together in Sibelius is disgusting looking. So what I do usually is, oh, this is so fun. Quantize, 100%, boom, everything looks glorious here. And I have to go through that with everything. Usually on the more action-y cues, not so much, because he's always on grit, because it's action, you have to be there. But emotional stuff, he plays more freely. So
that's why I chose this cue.
So like, for example, here, and sometimes strings, you know, have a bit of a delay, so he'll kind of anticipate that. So this stuff, like, I go through, make sure that it's, like I said, quantized properly, and then I pretty much delete anything that Amy wouldn't find to be useful. So I end up like cleaning up the session, which I don't know if I should take the time to do right now. Yeah, because we should probably get to you. So, but yeah, I'll get rid of any MIDI. As you see over here, we have a lot of tracks. The template that Jeff uses for Star Trek is huge. We're trying to do this on one laptop. He normally has 4 computers, making sure everything runs perfectly most of the time. Okay, so yeah, Amy will get a perfectly, actually I think I might have mild. Yeah.
When you were sending off the cue for picking up like okay by the producers, would you send the one that is quantized after?
No. So what I do is I'll play and I'll either print it as I'm done. I'll print the stems as I'm done, and those stems are what gets sent to Alex for review. The stems that Tracy's talking about are the stems that we will have to sort of give to Amy to hear what's supposed to be played. So she'll have a stereo of my mix and my unquantized stuff, and then she'll also have the quantized material so she can see where it's actually supposed to go. What Tracy was saying is very true. A lot of the sample libraries are latent, so the engineer who I work with, Michael, has referred to it as the Russo rush. I have now learned how to play everything 40 milliseconds in advance, so I can play in time, or else everything would be just out of time. I would hear it out of time. It's not actually correct. That's why it all has to get
Although
done.
we recently fixed it, so now he's all a mess.
Now everything's early.
Also, very important thing, I also print clicks for Amy. So she gets the stems, the clicks, so that she knows what's going on there, and then cleaned up MIDI that kind of looks like this with everything else deleted. So then Amy takes over.
One of the other things we also have to do before, I'm sorry, go, yes, oh yes. Tracy! Woohoo! One of the things we also have to do is we print clicks, but we also print many versions of clicks. We print quarter note clicks, eighth note clicks, and sometimes 16th note clicks, depending on the speed of the cue. And that's because a lot of times the players will want different resolution clicks to help them, especially with the super actiony da 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 da. They need more than just tick 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 tick. So we do lots of different.
That sounded like river dance for a second. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Fun part begins. It's what I've done to you in these years. So hey, I'm Jeff's orchestrator, Amy. We've been working together for 4 years, something like that, since the end of The Night Of, which was a great show, and we did from Fargo season 2 onwards. So, okay, so I'll walk you through basically my process. Jump in and ask questions. It's going to be rapid fire orchestration up here. If the session ever opened.
Hello, Pro Tools.
Hello. So I have a question. That was quick.
So is there any law against using Logic or Digital Performer?
In my studio, there is a law, actually. There is a law punishable by death. Anything other than Pro Tools. No, there's no law. I mean, for me, I come from being in a rock band playing in studios, and all I ever knew was Pro Tools. So it was always going to be the path of least resistance in terms of what I was going to use. I learned how to use Pro Tools really early in my career, and then learning how to sequence in Pro Tools was just an extension of that. But I know a lot of composers who use Digital Performer, Logic, which is fine, and various others. Cubase. Cubase is probably the favorite amongst composers in LA.
Cubase.
Yeah, Cubase is yes. Yeah, but.
Pro Tools does too, but they're not.
It's not good.
They're nowhere near the level of Sibelius and Finale. I don't think anybody would use the printout of Pro Tools or Digital Performer of any of those to give to live musicians. It's just not, the notation software is not there in there yet.
And also in terms of like being able to look at notes, I have become so much more accustomed to looking at a piano roll that's just, when I see notes, that's what I see in my head now. I don't even see notes anymore. I see notes on a piano roll at the right length, as opposed to, yeah. All the major scoring stages, all the major recording studios in Los Angeles use Pro Tools. So using Pro Tools has become sort of ubiquitous. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd love to know from Amy and Tracy, how did you guys get started doing what you're doing?
Well, I studied music growing up. I came from a really musical family in Ireland, and I studied kind of classical piano, and then I went to Trinity and did my undergrad in Dublin in not composition actually, but music tech and musicology and music tech, yeah. And then I went on and did my master's in film scoring at Berkeley College of Music, and then moved out to LA 6 years ago when I met Jeff. And how did I get the job?
So it's funny. So her boyfriend was an assistant of mine about 6 years ago, and both of them came in to interview.
Yeah, I interned for Jeff for 2 weeks, and then I hit the road.
And she was like, fuck this, I'm out. So they both were there, and then Jordan, her boyfriend, actually ended up staying, and Amy went on to be working with a number of other composers, including my friend Ben, and okay. And then I had another orchestrator on the first season of Fargo and the beginning of The Night Of that it just ended up not working out. And I called Amy and I said, hey, do you want to just try to orchestrate something for me? And she did, and we never turned back. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd been working with an orchestrator at the time, and we had just done John Legend's World Tour, so it was perfect timing. It just came off that, and I think Jordan had told Jeff about it, and he was in a crunch, and there was a night off session the next morning, and there was like 20 minutes of music that wasn't orchestrated. It was a mess. And I pulled an all-nighter, and here I am.
And it sounded amazing. Well, you know, Tracy came to the studio on recommendation of Amy. So
Yeah, Tracy used to help me with the orchestration, actually. And then Jeff stole her from me. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, one more. Yes. I do know those guys. Yeah, I've met them a few times.
Okay.
They definitely loved Legion. Yeah, I have heard it, and it does sound somewhat like that way in an electronic. It's great. It's a great album. Yeah.
We're getting snap.
Yeah, we should hurry
I'm
up.
going to keep moving. Okay, so this is the session, the cleaned up session that Tracy passes along to me. As you can see, I basically just get mostly the orchestral elements and any MIDI that Jeff has. We don't usually record live harp on big episodes. We sometimes will, like the finale, and we don't record percussion. But she leaves all of those in for me because I want to see like a full idea of what he wrote, what he meant, what he was going for. So yeah, I'll keep those in there, but I usually hide them. And then Jeff has an upside down template, if you ask me. The woodwinds on top. So yeah, I'll take these, and then so we have our woodwinds or brass, the darker yellow, and then all of these string patches. So what I'll do is I import a separate tracks from another Pro Tools session that I have set up that helps me get things into Sibelius cleanly. So let me just grab that. Import session. This guy, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, so I'll basically just import all of these, which are just my cleaned up tracks. So they come in blank, and then basically what I do is I go down through these tracks one by one, and I'll assign them to each of these. So that flute goes there, and I mute them as I go just to make sure I'm not missing anything. So drop all of those down, and then I go through and let me just brighten those up. Then I will go through and kind of assign everything, and because the thing is with Jeff, as he mentioned, he'll often write in an ensemble patch. So say for the strings here, we have like violin 1, violin 2, viola, cello, bass, and then a string ensemble patch, and then another string ensemble patch, and then a flautando patch, and then a solo cello. Yeah, within 5 sets of strings. Thanks for that. But I've been working with him long enough that I can kind of mind read at this stage, and I know how he writes. So I know that if he writes this string ensemble patch, and I see, can you guys see that? Is it big enough? If I see this string ensemble patch like this, and then I see 5 separate sets of strings on top, like right there, I know that this is what he intends. These are the melodies and the kind of the guts of the chord. This was his figuring it out as he went from the top, and then I'll have a look through, and if this looks similar, and obviously I'll open the MIDI editor, and if they look similar, often he is just layering one patch on top of another for the sake of the mock-up, but I'll know one's flautando, one's string ensemble, so I'll know that he wants it to be that flautando sound. Do you guys know what flautando is? It's that when a string plays near the fingerboard and it has that light, airy, brushed sound. So it's different from just a regular bow. So yeah, keeping all that in mind. So then I'll go down through and just assign, say I'll drop all of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to the strings. I'll have that. And then I'll go through these string ensemble patches and one by one look through, see what he intends on top. You see how these are kind of on top of each other voicings-wise? And we all know that's not good. For recording, and I know that's not what he wants either. He doesn't intend it. It's supposed to be voiced properly, and these are just chords kind of as a guide for him to write the separate parts. So yeah, I'll go through. That's pretty much all of that. And then so when I get that all popped into the right place, it looks like this. Here we go. And then on Star Trek, we usually have 4 woodwinds. Sometimes we have 6, and we have this awesome player who can play all the woodwinds. So we'll pass off clarinet, oboe. Today, we just have a regular flute and 2 clarinets, so we reorchestrated it a little bit for what you'll hear today. So yeah, and as you see here, then I'll go through, and in the regions, I'll make little notes for myself to keep in mind. This part is a solo cello, tutti celli, all the cellos are back in, just notes and flautando, and this should be soft, and just to keep in mind. And then, big thing I do is I will go through, listen through everything, and I'll re-meter it, as Jeff mentioned. Just it's all about just ease for the players, like making it as easy for them to read, as easy for them to get the feel of it the first time. If we left this all on 4/4, people would be coming in on beat 4 and the end of 3, and they don't really get the feel for phrases so much. So yeah, it's just all about making it so easy to read that no one has a question. That's kind of the aim at the session. But there are always questions. So yeah, so what I'll do, I'll import.
We have yet to have a session without a question.
So yeah, let's say I'll just have a quick look at the strings. Okay, so we see here, we're pretty much in 4/4. If you can see, I don't know if you guys work with grid. I'm sure all of you composers know what's going on here. Shout at me if you don't. So we'll see we're in 4/4, 4/4, 4/4. And then obviously this is the beginning of the phrase here. I mean, I say obviously, I know this theme, so I know this is the beginning of the phrase. But yeah, like I said, we're on beat 4 here, 13 beat 4, so we don't want that. So I'll go change bar 13 to a 3/4 bar, and then bar 14 to a 4/4, not a 1/4 bar. That would not be cool. Change it, and I'll just go through like that, and obviously we're in 4/4, and I'm listening through as I'm doing this to really get the best, to pick all the best options. And so what it looks like for a finish, if I import the tempo meter map, no, I don't want that. I just want to import this tempo meter map down here, and then these all pop in here, just so it makes the most sense. Next, am I boring everyone to death? Jeff, jump in.
No, I'm interested.
This is like riveting stuff. Okay, then I will do, and I'll take all of these MIDI tracks and jump. I can't even say this. This is where the score editor in Pro Tools comes in, which is horrendously awful and makes my life a living hell. It's just not good. Get on it, Avid. Okay, so these, and I'll have a look through this. I'll listen through. This is just going to give me a general guide of what the music will look like when I export it to Sibelius. So just make sure nothing's on top of each other. There's no weird clusters, and it's just a general. I'll have a look through, have a listen through, make sure it's all good. Then I will export that to Sibelius. So it sends out kind of a really rough version. Let me put that in. Okay. And then I open my fabulous template, which I spent a long time putting together. So, yeah, so I use Sibelius. Some people use Finale, but, you know, those people can die.
We're serious at this place. We're serious about like what we like and what we don't like, seriously.
So yeah, I have this whole template set up. This over here should be the Star Trek emblem, but this laptop hates me. So, but you'll see it in the PDF. So I have everything set up very meticulously. I'll go through, do a save as. Well, first of all, let me talk you through. So I have obviously the flutes, the woodwind section up top, the horns and brass, low brass here, trumpets there, and then the strings down the bottom. I like to have lots of bar numbers because when we're moving through cues very quickly, you need to be able to find your place when you're conducting. Big time signatures, very important for composers for conductors to read. Okay, and then I'll just go through, save that, call it whatever it's called, 3M2, blah, blah, and change the name, 3M2. Oh my God. I got up at 5 a.m. Blah. And then I also have blah. Yep, jump.
Are there any instruments which were harder to understand how they work? Like how long somebody can breathe into a tuba or?
Well, that's kind of something that Jeff leaves up to me a little bit. That's the kind of my job to make sure. He'll like sometimes he'll write a horn that is 25 bars, and I'm thinking they're going to be
They can't do
blue
that.
in the
Circular
face.
breathing.
But yeah, it's just figuring out ways, or we'll stagger the breathing. You know, especially on low woodwinds, bass flutes, bassoons. He tends to like to use them as pads. So we'll try to make sure we have enough players that we can stagger the breathing and pass them off to each other, stuff like that.
Yeah, we use
On Star
woodwinds a
Trek
lot,
they are,
yeah.
for sure.
I think one of the things that we sort of had to try to figure out was how to orchestrate for Deduk, because I used Deduk a lot, certainly in season 1, a little bit in season 2, and that was always like, wait, can it actually play that instrument? It's very difficult to play lower notes on that.
Yeah, and he had written a lot of chromatic parts, and Dedukes are diatonic, so we have this amazing Deduk player who figures it out, and I don't even know how. But okay, so then I'm trying to get through this quickly. Let me grab that. So then I'll open up this export session that disappeared. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Oh, there. Okay. So this is the rough one that just came from Pro Tools. And I will... Wait. Okay, basically, I import all of the MIDI that I just exported from Pro Tools into this session, and it looks something a little like this. Ta-da! Yep, so then I'll import it and obviously pretend all of these dynamics and stuff aren't in here. I use this panorama mode. If any of you guys use Sibelius, this is definitely the way to work. I'll go through back and forth from the Pro Tools session into Sibelius, and I'll add the tempos, very important, and listen through. And right here at the end, we have the writ. I give them a kind of a general tempo for the end so that they know how much they're slowing down. And then I just go through, I usually start with strings, go through adding dynamics and techniques and, flautando. This one, Jeff had written this patch at the beginning here with a soft patch, which is actually recorded concertino with the mutes on the strings. But oftentimes we don't have time to get the mutes off before they need to play without the mutes. So we'll use stuff like flautando or soltasto, just different soltasto, again, like up on the fingerboard, and just different techniques. Fill in the dynamics, just go through, and then adding slur marks, basically giving as much direction to every single player as possible so that they're not asking questions, so that they feel comfortable playing their part. And that we can get it sounding as close to the mock-up and as close to what Jeff intended. So yeah, we'll go through this down here, just an example of, if you saw that solo cello, couple of bars in there. This here, little one, I don't even know what that's called. Anyone? Tracy? The little degrees, 1 degree. For me, it's first chair, but yeah. So first chair, solo, bring that out, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'll go through the strings, and then I'll usually go back through and do the brass, and then do the woodwinds, all the time listening back and forth to make sure I'm balancing woodwind or balancing dynamics.
Sorry, just a quick question.
Okay.
When you had the solo cello and then the duty, was that from? How did you interpret that from what Jeff did?
He had a solo cello patch in there, a separate solo cello patch, yeah. So I knew what it was. Yeah, and I know, we're running out of time. So yeah, and that's it. I basically go through, and then I will make all of the scores and parts. I fix it all up to make it look pretty. I'll go through each individual part. Here's bass flute, alto flute, blah, blah, blah. Here's the violins, and we use violin 1 and 2 on the same part because we often end up swapping their parts, changing them around, so they need to see each other's parts, and just make it all look pretty. Then I print it all out, then I tape it, and then I hand Jeff a score, and then I eat brownies.
Yeah. So we're gonna bring out some musicians, and then you'll sort of see how we record this. Yes, I took it. Sorry. I end up with. A big old conductor score. Yeah. I'm gonna work without a microphone, so if anybody can't hear me, just let me know. Yes, please.
Jeff, did you want the other parts in now?
No, let's
Or
just do click, just the click, yeah? So we usually record with all of the prelays in for me. None of the prelays in for the band because they're sometimes we'll have a pad so there's tuning because we don't want it to be out of tune with the prelays. So we're gonna do this a couple of times. The first time we're gonna do it, all you'll hear are the players on stage and you'll hear a click because we usually run with click, and we'll see the picture. If you can make the picture slightly bigger, that'd be great.
I can do that.
So we will start from bar 0. So we'll take clicks from bar 0. You go four clicks to downbeat at 1. Okay? Here we go. That's basically what I hear on the stand. I mean, but imagine there are 35 more people here. But this is the idea. The idea is for me to be able to hear what they're doing, and in the booth they'll be hearing what you're about to hear, including what they're playing. So let's do that one more time. So again, clicks from 0, please. Here we go. So usually that's about all we have time for on the stand. We have time to do it one time, we go through it, and then at that point, maybe there are some notes that go back and forth between Amy and or Tracy and I from the booth. We talk about dynamics. We talk about wanting to bring out the cello solo a little more, maybe, or we talk about wanting to bring out the clarinet. And then we do it one more time like that. And then we move on to the next cue because, like I said before, there's simply not enough time. We have to record 35 minutes of music in 3 hours, and it's a lot. And a good portion of it is this, and this kind of stuff sort of comes relatively easy. It's nice and long notes. It's all about trying to blend the band and get the emotional context going. But a lot of it is these big action pieces, and those big action pieces can take a long time to get really, really tight because we've got, many different rhythms being played by different instruments, and it can be quite complicated. But does anybody have any questions about what we just did? Yes. Did I? Yeah. No, I self-taught. When I went to write the first score for Fargo, I had written the original theme on guitar, and I thought, oh, I could play that melody on a violin. The violin could play that melody solo. And then as I sort of thought about that, I thought about what the other orchestra instruments could do, and I sort of then had this orchestral theme, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is what the score should sound like. Then I picked up an orchestrating book to sort of figure out, like, okay, this instrument cannot play this note, so don't write that. And most modern sample libraries don't allow you to do that anyway at this point. So, it's all sort of laid out for me. I can't play, a low C on a violin. So I don't really have much of a problem with that. But I did then also take a little course in conducting because I wanted to be able to be in the room with the band because I'm a player, I'm a musician. I like to be a part of that. It's not just about the writing of the music, but it's about the performing of the music. It's about communicating, for me, with musicians in order to try to achieve the end result. Right. It's a lot of counting. It's a lot of counting. And, it was daunting at the beginning. First doing it, I remember looking at Amy going, God damn, 12/8? Come on, don't do that to me. But you get used to it. You do it enough times. I'm very fortunate to be able to get up in front of, a bunch of really great musicians many, many times. At one point this last fall, we were doing 2 orchestral sessions every week while writing and orchestrating. We were doing dying right at the same time. We were doing this, and we were doing a show called Umbrella Academy, and thank you. It was a lot of fun, but I remember feeling at the end of March or when we finished, all of us were just like pale white. I mean, it was a lot of work. But when you get to do it that much, you get good. You flex the muscle. Yeah.
For Amy, and I guess for you as well, do you guys use key signatures or is it all accidentals?
Sorry. Accidentals.
What was the question?
Key signatures or accidentals?
Oh yeah, no, we don't work with key signatures at
Accidentals.
all. Yeah, and even if it's like he said here, right in the key of D, that piece that we did, it's in D, and then it has these shifts down to D flat. Could be C sharp. I like to feel like it's D flat. But even when we're in D minor, I don't even go with the C sharps if it's easier to read the D flat. I'm not worried about everyone knowing what key we're in. I'm more worried about the ease of reading. Yeah.
Oh, that's the main thing, is making sure that everybody knows what to play, when to play it, because we don't have time. There's not a lot of time. A lot of the television thing is like move, fast. Yeah.
Just curious, you're saying you don't usually have the relay stuff in the headphones.
No.
But it's
I do.
they kind of dug in more with having the percussion and everything.
So occasionally we do. Occasionally we're like, you know what? We should put the percussion in. We should let them really groove to it, especially when we do a lot of the percussive stuff. Occasionally we will put that stuff in so we can groove with what we have in prelays. A lot of times I find they play more in tune to themselves without it. it's sort of a balance. Like, are they going to be more in tune with the track, with it, or without it? Sometimes it really just depends. Yeah.
Have you ever been in a position where you come into a show in the beginning, develop some ideas about the palette and the themes and stuff, and then just built up a family of cues on spec before you hit picture, and then use those in addition to doing some custom work per episode just to get in front of the TV timeline?
80% of the things I do are like that. 80% of the things I do, I write suites of music before the show starts. I'm currently writing Fargo season 4, and I'm about an hour's worth of music into writing themes for the whole season. What'll happen is we'll start temping with those, and then I will craft the score to to what we're using thematically. And then sometimes it's like, we need a new theme here, and then you write something to picture. With Star Trek, it's not really like that. With Star Trek, there's so much going on at once. We need to get right into it, so it's just picture, writing it straight to picture without pre-writing themes, except for in that first season of Star Trek. With Picard, there's a main title theme already written and a couple of themes that I got to write because we had to do some trailer for it. Other than that, like it's to picture. So I'd say it's about 80-20.
One more, Jeff?
Sorry, I just watching the credits for Star Trek many times in my entire life. I know Gene Roddenberry has a very inclusive headspace. Is there a mandate to have more women working on the show?
I'm glad that you brought that up. There's no mandate. There is no mandate. I was brought into this this world of composing by 2 women who are some of my favorite composers. So I want to make it a priority to have more women, people of color, involved in all aspects of making music. I think that music is a very sort of wide-ranging thing. So there's no specific mandate with Star Trek in general. There's just like this is what I like to do, and that's why. Yeah. Thank you guys very much for indulging us.
Thanks, man. So great. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Russo.